We are now live.
Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and open up the meeting. Welcome everyone to see our Madre City Council meeting. And I'd like to have Madam City Clerk call the order, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mayor Jean Goss.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Edward Garcia.
Present.
Councilmember Rachel Arizmendi.
Present.
Councilmember Kelly Krebs.
Here.
And Councilmember Robert Parkhurst.
Here.
Mr. Mayor, you have a quorum.
Tonight, Councilmember Arizmendi will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance and Inspiration.
Okay, if you can all please stand and say along with me the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. And there's my dog. With February upon us, I just wanted to highlight a few things about February, and two of them are about recognizing and celebrating diversity. First of all, every February, the U.S. honors and the contributions and sacrifices of the African Americans who have helped shape the nation. Black History Month celebrates the rich cultural heritage, triumphs, and adversities that are an indelible part of our country's history. This year's theme is Black Health and Wellness, and it pays homage to medical scholars and healthcare providers. The theme is especially timely as we enter the third year of COVID-19 pandemic, which has disproportionately affected minority communities and placed unique burdens on the Black health professionals. So February is Black History Month, and I hope we can all celebrate that. The next item I wanted to recognize in March is that it's also Lunar New Year. And Lunar New Year is one of the most important celebrations of the year among East and Southeast Asian cultures, including Chinese, Vietnamese, and Korean communities, among others. The New Year celebration is usually celebrated for multiple days, not just one. And in 2022, Lunar New Year begins on February 1. And lastly is Valentine's Day, which I'm not the biggest Valentine's Day fan, but I thought I'd end this in a very light note. A friend of mine, for the last 11 years, she's been posting Valentine Day card lines, if you want to call it. And I just thought it would be a fun way to end. So these are some of the Valentine's Day lines. If you were words on a page, you'd be what we call fine print. Let me tie your shoelaces because I don't want you falling for anybody else. Have you been to the doctors lately? Because I think you're lacking some vitamin B. And lastly, if I were a cat, I'd spend all 9 lives with you. So with that, I want to wish everyone a happy February.
Thank you, Councilmember Arizmendi. Now we're going to move right along to approval of the meeting agenda. I'd like everyone to take a look at it. And if there's any movement for change or approval as is, please make a motion.
I'll move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? I guess we'll have to do a roll call, Madam City Clerk.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I heard a first from Councilmember Parkhurst, seconded by Councilmember Krebs.
Correct.
And how do you vote, Mayor?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Garcia?
Aye.
Councilmember Arizmendi?
Aye.
Councilmember Krebs?
Aye.
And Councilmember Parkhurst?
Aye.
The motion is passed unanimously, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, then moving right along, we'll move to approval for reading resolutions and ordinances. I'd like to get a motion on behalf of that, please.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Madam City Clerk, you're up again.
I heard a motion to approve by Councilmember Krebs, and Mayor Pro Tem, was that you that seconded it?
No, it was myself, Robert Parkhurst.
Okay,
Councilmember
thank you.
Parkhurst.
Thank you, Councilmember Parkhurst. Mayor, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Garcia?
Aye.
Councilmember Arizmendi?
Aye.
Councilmember Krebs?
Aye.
And Councilmember Parkhurst?
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The motion is passed unanimously.
Okay, and again, moving right along, we need to take a look at our meeting minutes from the last meeting and see if we have any corrections to do. If not, or if we do, I'd like to get a motion to that effect.
I have no change. I'll move with the, oh, it sounds like Councilmember Parkhurst, you may have had some changes.
I do not have any changes. I was going to move to approve.
Is there a second? Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, good. Madam City Clerk, you're on again.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I heard the motion to approve by Councilmember Parkhurst, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Garcia. And Mayor Goss, how do you vote?
Aye.
And Mayor Pro Tem Garcia?
Aye.
Councilmember Arizmendi?
Aye.
Councilmember Krebs?
Aye.
And Councilmember Parkhurst?
Aye.
Motion to approve the minutes as presented has been approved, Mr. Mayor.
Great. Now we're going to move to Mayor and City Council reports. And I'm looking for a volunteer.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councilmember Parkhurst.
So I have a couple of things. As usual, there were 2 Clean Power Alliance meetings, nothing significant coming out of those. We had the solar groundbreaking on the 26th. It was a fabulous event. I want to thank city staff for everything they did to do that. And I'm looking forward to seeing that project completed. I think it's the end of March. So that's a pretty quick turn on that. So kudos to everyone's work who's worked so hard on that. Also, last week, the Sierra Madre Fire Department had a meeting to talk about a green waste chipping program that we'll be having. We got a grant for that program, and we'll be encouraging people to, especially those that are closest to the Angeles National Forest, to trim their trees and bring them, and they'll have about 3 chipper days going on where all of that greenery can be chipped and either hauled away or used as mulch. And then finally, 2 other things. I think some of the folks, this is a big night for folks in the canyon. In addition to the fire department meeting, we've got that water main that's being replaced up there. I know that folks that have lived up there, that's been a large impact. First, it was all of the county trucks going up there. Then you've got on a temporary water main, and now you've got the street dug up again. And we appreciate everyone's patience as that gets done. I know that the public works staff is working really hard to complete that as quickly as possible. And then finally, we've had an issue of bears in the canyon. Just yesterday, 3 bears broke into a home. I think it's the 10th one that we've got recently. So I know that staff is looking very closely into what can be done about that, and that we'll be seeing the Wildlife Watch program coming before council, I think in 2 weeks. And I want to thank the Natural Resources Commission. There was a team there that has worked on putting together some recommendations for us. But in the meantime, I'd really like to encourage everyone to not feed any of the wildlife. It's just going to habituate them and going to cause more activity of them breaking into homes. And we'll be probably considering here in the future other things we can do, like bear resistant cans to help prevent the bears from getting into garbage. So I'm sorry that was a little bit longer, but I wanted to, there's a lot of exciting things going on.
Thank you, Councilmember Parkhurst. Who'd like to go next?
Mr. Mayor, I can jump in.
Councilmember Arizmendi.
I have a very short report, but I did attend the Community Services Commission meeting on January 31st, and I had the opportunity to listen to a presentation about a bike-friendly community, and there were a lot of different recommendations that the presenter, John Lloyd, provided. It is what he's seeing as a professional in terms of his teaching. He's a professor in this field, and also him as a biker. There are a lot of different recommendations, a lot of suggestions, and the Community Services Commission will be considering, I think, at a future time, some things that they would like to present to City Council. But I think one of what I had said, the low-hanging fruit, is that there's a bike to work day and hopefully I didn't miss it. And I'm trying to see with Director Rebecca Silva if I have missed it, but if not, we can bring that, and I'd like to see how we can recognize that and encourage folks in the city to bike to work.
Cool. Thank you, Councilmember Mendy. Who'd like to go next?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Creeps, go ahead.
So I've been attending the Planning Commission meetings, and tonight we have on our agenda the result of one of those meetings in the interim. But because of that, I just wanted to be the first to remind folks publicly or make the announcement that's been out on public social media and other public media that we are having a joint meeting next week, February 15th on Tuesday, with both us, the council, and the Planning Commission to discuss the Meadows at Bailey Canyon project, and just wanted to make sure that that's getting as wide of circulation as possible so that everyone who would like to join us will be able to. Again, it's Tuesday, February 15th at 5 p.m. in Memorial Park at the band shell. So just wanted to put that out there as part of our meeting tonight, even though I know it's making the rounds publication avenues.
Thank you, Councilmember Creeps. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor Goss. The Senior Commission's meeting was canceled on February 3rd, but there will be another meeting on March 3rd as a follow-up. Also, I just want to follow up on some of the previous reports and just a couple of pieces of information. Councilmember Parkhurst mentioned the work that's going on the Upper Canyon with the water main repair, and just want the residents to know that our city management, along with our chiefs, the fire department and the police department, have safety contingency plans in place, because it is very tight up there. There's going to be a lot of trucks and working. So we are thinking about that, and the staff and our public safety chiefs are aware of the issues that can happen, and they have a plan in place for any emergencies. And also February 26th, I know we're gonna have one more meeting before that, but that's opening day for Sierra Madre Little League. I was trying to find the opening day for Sierra Madre Girls Softball Association. I have not seen that yet, but once I know that, I'll report out on that, because that's always a great event to come out and support the youth of Sierra Madre. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Just a very brief report on my part. On the 26th of January, I did go to the first Los Angeles County Sanitation Board meeting that mayors do, and not a whole lot to report. A couple of small things, actually, and maybe not so small. They announced that there are very substantial state grants available to help municipalities publicize the organics program that we're now having to do through the changes in state law. And when I shared that with staff, of course, was already on top of that. And also, just an aside, one of the ways in which public health authorities gauge the status of the pandemic is by checking, of course, the sewage. And they reported on the 26th that the Omicron variant was in free fall in terms of their measurements of it in the water flow at that time. So I haven't heard anything different. That trend hasn't changed. So that tends to mirror all the other information we're getting about Omicron. That's the end of my report. I'd like to now move on to public comment on non-agenda items. Anything that's not on our agenda, if you have something to share with us, we'd love to hear it. Turn that over to our technical people and Mr. Milan.
Mr. Mayor, we do have someone ready to speak. I'll pass it through now.
Good evening, council members. Deb Sheridan, Valley Vista Drive. And I would like to thank Council Member Krebs for mentioning the joint meeting next Tuesday. And I will reiterate, it's in the band shell at 5 o'clock, which is sometimes too early for people to show up. But this is an important meeting, but it will be presentation will be by New Urban West, the developers. I have asked several questions actually about the procedure to be followed next Tuesday. And I'd like to clarify for other residents what City Manager Reynoso told me that the procedures will be. Number one, Mayor Goss will run this meeting. We residents are limited to 3 minutes. 2, we will be permitted to ask questions after the presentation by the developer of the monastery property. We cannot direct our questions toward the developer, but we must ask the Planning Commission and City Council. And they may or may not ask New Urban West or staff our questions to be answered. 3, we each get 1 shot at asking a question, and that is it. I am urging the Planning Commission and City Council to read our Preserve Sierra Madre 24-page rebuttal to the Environmental Impact Report, which was inexplicably missing from the final EIR. We spent 2 full months talking to experts, reviewing the general plan, and writing our rebuttal. At worst, this omission implies a deliberate attempt to hide it, especially since 2 letters were included that were received late, and also my email merely asking if we could send this in by email. At least it signifies sloppy work. And I thank you all for what you do. And by the way, I tried to call in on my phone twice and I kept getting hung up on, and the voice was saying, nope, you're wrong, goodbye. FYI. Thank you, that's it.
Are there any other public comments? Could you repeat that?
Mayor, please stand by. There might be one more person
Okay.
raising their hand. We're trying to make sure.
And Mr. Mayor, once the public comment is done, there were 3 emails that I'd like to acknowledge that were received prior.
Okay.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Wonderful. Yes. Thank you, Mayor and council members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Lynn Coleman. I'm on Carter Avenue. At the December 2nd Planning Commission meeting, the new owner of the Wisteria house presented plans to upgrade their new home by adding a new addition. There were some concerns brought up by commission members about the impacts on the wisteria vine due to the construction. To everyone's surprise, it was noted that there are currently no protections for the vine and that it can be cut down and removed by any property owner at any time. We've been fortunate that the previous owners, Bob and Nell, took good care of the vine for almost 50 years and welcomed visitors every year for the Wisteria Festival. Unfortunately, we can't be certain that this will be the case for the next 50 years. At the next City Council meeting, residents spoke passionately about the history and importance of the vine to the city and how it will be protected going forward. It was noted that the vine is memorialized in our city's logo. These concerns raise the question, what has the city done to protect and preserve the wisteria vine following the Planning Commission meeting? We would hope to have had a discussion and heard something regarding the vine and what actions, if any, the city can take or has taken, but I haven't heard anything. Can you please update us on this important matter? Thank you very much. Good night.
Thank you, Ms. Coleman. Are there other public comments?
Yes, Mayor, it looks like we have one more person. Please stand by.
Hi. Hi, this is Ann Chesterman. Thank you. I was not sure I could get in. I'd like to concur with Deb Sheraton's comments. Since I've got 3 minutes, I want to squeeze in. I have had a bear walk up to me last Wednesday night. I got out of the car. I got my plastic bottle with the rocks in it to shake her off. Scares them away. It's a loud noise. I've been doing that for a couple of years. The next morning, I stepped out my front door and the bear was right there. I had a 5-gallon glass bottle as my weapon. I threw it at her. The crash noise scared it off. My cousin lives in Alaska, Haines, Alaska. They killed 35 bears last year because once a bear is fed, he's a dead bear because he repeats his behavior. Once he succeeds, he does it again. We need a direct liaison to Fish and Wildlife. I've gone to the police 3 times and they tell me to call Fish and Wildlife. There's an 800 number, there's a 562 number, there's a 310 number. I've reached one guy down in Torrance. Maybe I have to be maimed or killed for somebody to take this seriously. Safety is an issue here. Please, let's have an immediate liaison with a local Fish and Wildlife where we can get some help. The bear that's been around my place has a yellow tag on it, so somebody's already dealt with it. Can you help us, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Chesterman. Are there
Mayor,
any other public comments?
I believe there are no more folks trying to make public comment at this time.
Okay, and I think, Madam City Clerk, you wanted to alert us to the emails that we've already received.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The city received 3 emails. 2 of the emails were read by the callers this evening. All 3 emails were forwarded to the City Council for their review and consideration. And all 3 emails have been uploaded to the city's website for transparency and public access.
Okay, thank you. City Manager Reynoso, if you're there, would you be able to comment on the bear situation just to get us up to date?
Good evening, Mayor. Thank you. Yes, we have met with Fish and Wildlife. We met with them yesterday. We've also spoken with a few of our neighboring cities who are experiencing the same issue. The bear in question, bear tag is, I think, is 508, has been relocated once. We requested from Fish and Wildlife that the bear be relocated again. They say that that is ineffective. The bear is going to find its way back. What they're recommending is that we put an educational campaign out. They're willing to come and speak with our community on ways to mitigate and to lessen the chances for bears to have human interaction. So we are working with Fish and Wildlife, and we reached out to them to be here on February 22nd when we present our wildlife management plan to council, for them to be here for the community to answer questions as well.
Have they confirmed that they'll be in attendance?
They have not confirmed.
Okay, that sounds like it's pretty important to get them here. Thank you, City Manager Reynoso. Okay, that moves us along to the consent. Pardon me, I guess we have a presentation. I'm sorry. A very important one, actually. Overview of current and future local transportation program.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'll go ahead and take this one.
Ms. Carlson, okay, I didn't have your name on my list, but I recall now that you're doing this. Welcome and please educate us.
I'm happy to provide an update to the City Council this evening. I do need to explain some challenges that the program is facing in the near term. There's no action needed by the City Council tonight, but any direction or suggestions I believe are going to be very helpful for me. For about 20 years now, we've had pretty much the same program. We have the Gateway Coach. It's often called the Roundabout. It operates from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. and it's free to ride for all. It's got a set out map that is relatively consistent. It gets updated maybe every 4 to 6 years. The other component of our transportation program is our dial-a-ride service. And you can see the hours there from 8 to 10:30 in the morning and then 2 to 5 in the afternoon. This is available for seniors 62 plus and the differently abled. Both of these programs are operated for the last 8 years by a company called First Transit, and they have been a very good company to work with on the staff level. And I've heard a lot of positive comments from our riders about the company that has served us. This is all paid for with approximately $160,000 annual budget, and it comes from Proposition A local transit funds. Here is the map of the roundabout. You can see it was designed to center on locations that our seniors might be needing, as well as the schools. It was decided about 5 years ago that instead of going to the Gold Line at Sierra Madre Villa, the riders preferred that it stopped at Ralph's, which they could cross the street to the Gold Line, but that was a big preference of theirs that we might have to look at going forward. Over the last 10 years, we have seen quite a significant decline in our ridership. The green bar here is our dial-a-ride. The blue bar is our roundabout. So you can see the trends. We're really kind of falling out of the dial-a-ride. The roundabout seems to be, maintaining relatively well. I was kind of curious to see how this would go over the COVID challenges, and we decided not to make any changes for the COVID period, but it did stay relatively consistent, and we've seen a little bit of an uptick now in the roundabout again. Here's another one that we can see. I was able to bifurcate the ridership of the roundabout seniors and the roundabout adults and youth. And you can see back in 2012, it was quite popular. And I think this was a lot of school kids were using it to get from the YMCA or various other locations in town. A lot of the YMCA and those other programs have started providing their own transportation for after school kids. So the ridership is quite low, especially for the adults and the youth in town. Here are some considerations, and when I mentioned the challenges that are coming, our first transit agreement ends this June 30th, 2022. So we will have to go back out, if that's our intention, with the RFP for a new contractor. Again, I mentioned First Transit's been very good, and I hope that they would consider making a proposal. The 2 transportation buses that the city purchased with grant funds are at the end of their useful life. One of the buses is just not going to work ever again. The transportation is shot. The other one is being band-aided as much as we can. The idea here is if we do a RFP, we go to another company, we would have them provide the vehicles for the service. We've also noticed that a cost per rider figures are going in the wrong direction. In 2012, the cost per rider to the city was $14.11, and that rose to $107.89 in 2020. There's also some other considerations regarding emerging transportation options. Metro Micro, which had quite a bumpy start, has seemed to settled in quite a bit. I do still get some complaints, but I do feel like people are getting used to that program. Other services such as Uber and Lyft. And then I did mention some of these items to the Senior Commission a couple months ago, and we'll be bringing some of these questions to the Community Services Commission as well. And before we go tonight, I do want to make sure that the audience is aware of a feasibility study that's being hosted by the San Gabriel Valley Council of Governments. I believe we put that out in our email Village View last week it's a lot easier to hit the link when we send it electronically. But we will continue to publicize that, and anybody that might want to listen in or be part of that discussion, there's a link there, and it is going to be virtual, and it'll be Wednesday, February 23rd. And with that, I'd be happy to take your questions or hear what thoughts you might have going forward.
Okay, to my council colleagues, do you have any questions of Mr. Carlson?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilmember Creeves.
Just wondering about the COG feasibility study. And is that something that folks who are concerned about the elimination of the metro routes in our area through town, is that something that would influence the reconsideration of the metro routes through town? Is that relevant?
I believe that probably would be the best opportunity to mention some of these concerns. It is a area wide, so not everybody in the San Gabriel Valley was affected by the loss of a metro line. But I could hope that Sierra Madre residents that have those concerns might be able to listen in and participate in that outreach.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Mr. Mayor?
Mayor Pro Tem.
Just some budgetary questions. It's my understanding from the presentation, thank you, great presentation, Management Analyst Carlson, that our budget is approximately $160,000 on an annual basis, and that is funded by Prop A funds. So as we're going forward, I just want to have a good understanding of how the Prop A funds are allocated. Is it population-based? Is it needs-based? Is there some type of means regarding average or median income in the city? How was that allocated, and will we continue to have 160,000 or more? Because you mentioned that our next RFP might have a component that we'll need the buses provided. So I would think the cost would increase under that type of scenario.
Sure. That's a good question. And from what I understand is the 160,000 is a pretty steady number. So that leads me to believe that's based on population. It's been an easy thing to budget. It's worked right into our contract with First Transit. Not much to spare, nothing over, nothing under. It hits it right about where it needs to be. But yeah, we will keep an eye and see if anything is changing as far as the allocations that might come down to the cities. If we are going to be asking a company to provide their own vehicles, I can only assume that might increase the cost or reduce the services that we are looking at.
Thank you. Any other questions or follow-up?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilmember Arizmendi.
Hi. One comment and one question. Just a comment regarding the what the COG is doing. I mentioned it during my report last meeting that CEO Wiggins of Metro had commented on the micro mini and how people really like it. And I had shared that we started as Management Analyst Carlson had shared, it was a bumpy start, but I've been getting so far very positive responses to it. And what I didn't realize is we're one of the very, very few communities that has access to that. But the end result, we also had a metro line taken away. So I think those that are concerned, interested, want to provide some feedback, it would be a great opportunity to do so. But again, it's a regional look at the plan. But I wanted to highlight that because not everyone has the micro mini and not everyone had a metro line taken away. But the second part of this is a question, and Management Analyst Carlson, I was wondering with 160,000, I mean, there's no question there's a decline in ridership. I don't think things will be like they were 10 years ago, but we're still seeing a steady decline. And I do know that, at least for myself, I've had people reach out that they depend on that. But I am curious as to what other ways can Prop A money be used? And is it anything, is it something any other ways that maybe we have explored or not explored? But what are the other uses of Prop A money?
Sure, it really is. It's tied to local transportation. I did a survey with a lot of other cities in Southern California, and all of the models are strikingly similar to ours. Now, there are also possibilities that the funds can be used to subsidize other programs. And I know the city of Monrovia used these funds to subsidize rides to Lyft, I believe it was. And it turned into be quite of a difficult administrative program that they encountered. And I think, you know, I don't know if they still have the program and they worked out some of the bumpy areas, but that was one of the other more unique uses of the funds that I ran across.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Parkhurst.
Analyst Carlson, can you pull up the slide with the 10-year ridership totals? The first one that you had. So, thank you. So slide 4 there, I think.
This one?
Yeah, that one. So if you take out 2012, the roundabout looks, it's the 2021 number is more than 2013, close to 2014, 2017, 2019. So, if you kind of put your hand over the 2012, like the dial-a-ride, it seems somewhat consistent in ridership over about 10 years. Now the dial-a-ride, it's clearly sloping off. Do you have any idea why the roundabout is more stable than the dial-a-ride?
It's possible that one thing I noticed when I was looking through the figures is there's a relatively nice jump in July when the kids get out of school, and it's happened pretty consistently year to year. It's falling a little bit, but that was one of the markers that I did notice. The roundabout is available for everybody, so it doesn't really take into account any of the age of our population shifting and things like that, where the dial-a-ride might actually be affected by some of that. Other than that, nothing really jumped out and really struck me as something to concentrate on. And that's the best I could do with that question.
And the roundabout's the one with the buses that have reached the end of their life.
Actually, both programs use those buses.
Oh, okay.
There have been periods of time where First Transit is used their own vehicles for dial-a-ride, something a little bit smaller, but they also are not always able to use their own vehicles or have those available. So quite often it is our bigger buses for that service.
And these are riderships in a year, so you're having like 1,200 riders or 1,200 riders in 2013 and about 1,800 in 2021. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so it's not all that many. Okay. Thank you. That's very helpful.
Okay, Management Analyst Carlson, I want to thank you for the report. It was very, very clear and well done. And I think we'll just have to come back and revisit this at some point in the future. That takes us to the consent agenda, and mercifully tonight we only have one item on it. Madam City Clerk, would you mind going over it, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before the City Council this evening is one consent item. It's consideration of resolution 22-07 approving certain demands. It is recommended that the City Council approve City Council Resolution number 22-07 approving payment of city warrants in the aggregate amount of $301,246.11. Sierra Madre Library warrants in the aggregate amount of $4,989.05. And in addition, payroll transfer in the aggregate amount of $398,773.93 for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2022. Mr. Mayor, this concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Madam City Clerk. Are there any questions about item A? Okay, hearing none, I'd like to see if there's public comment on this item.
Mayor, we'll give folks to raise their hands for a few seconds here.
Okay.
Right now, I'm not seeing anyone raise their hands, but I'll keep an eye out.
We'll be patient.
Mayor, from the attendees that are on the meeting, I don't see anybody raising their hands, and therefore I can conclude that no one wishes to make public comment.
Okay, thank you. So we'll just bring this back. Do we have any comments from the council? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve?
Move to approve as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Madam City Clerk, would you mind calling the roll again?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I heard a first a motion to approve by Councilmember Arizmendi, seconded by Councilmember Krebs. And Mr. Mayor, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Garcia?
Aye.
Councilmember Arizmendi?
Aye.
Councilmember Krebs?
Aye.
Councilmember Parkhurst? And we're getting a thumbs up from Councilmember Parkhurst. Mr. Mayor, you have a unanimous 4-voice vote and 1 thumbs up.
Thank you, Madam City Clerk. Okay, well, that moves us on to our discussion items. We have 4 tonight. And we'll start with the first one on the agenda, discussion of the Municipal Code Text Amendment Priority List. I think Director Gonzalez will be up, or will you have someone else?
I will be making the presentation
Okay.
today. And we do have a PowerPoint, so I'm waiting for that to be queued up. Let's go to the next slide. So the reason for putting this on your agenda this evening is in response to a meeting that was held on January 20th, 2022 by the Planning Commission, where they prioritized a list of municipal code text amendments for City Council consideration. The Commission also categorized those municipal code text amendments into 4 categories, one being state mandates, followed by annual ordinance cleanup, discretionary demolition permit procedures. The Commission wanted to pull that from a general ordinance cleanup and have a little bit more time to deliberate and discuss what I will be sharing with you. And then also the Planning Commission suggestions that have come up over the course of 2020. So on the next slide, some of the state mandates that I'm going to be talking about are already under works by the Planning Commission. We are responding to state mandates. A lot of these bills go effective as of January 1st. Staff determined instead, in lieu of trying to achieve the February 1st or January 1st date, that we would proceed with our regular process in lieu of an urgency ordinance. So we are bringing this forward through the Planning Commission. They've already had a discussion item, in particular on these 4 items that I will be pointing out. And we will be scheduling that matter at their next meeting as a public hearing. The first state mandate is in response to SB 9 called Urban Lot Splits. And this allows for ministerial approval of the division of single lots into 2 single-family residential parcels. And that's in response to Senate Bill 9. Also, very similar to that is the small home lot development, which is also another ministerial approval, so it does not go to the commission. In this case, this differs slightly. It applies to multifamily residential zones, but you can split those lots and develop single family homes up to the allowable density. And in parity to that, because both of these are ministerial actions, we wanted to add a new chapter called Ministerial Design Review Permits to basically approve up the qualified housing units in single family residential zones pursuant specifically to SB 9. So we're trying to create this process so we have some ministerial design review instead of just the project going straight to plan check. The other item that, if we can go to the next slide, number 4 is the affordable housing ordinance that will be amended to conform to state density bonus law. It appears that we are making changes to the affordable housing ordinance almost on a yearly basis, at least for the last couple of years. And now this is a 3rd amendment. So that is also being considered by the Planning Commission at their next meeting as a public hearing. And we have scheduled in for future meetings, we need to update our accessory dwelling unit and junior accessory dwelling unit ordinance, currently called second units. We need to conform to state mandate and current law. Currently, what we are doing is utilizing the state ordinance to process ADUs and junior ADUs. Next slide, please. So the second category was the general ordinance cleanup effort. And the first three items were actually before the city council back in 2020. And they were part of the commercial code and parking code updates, you might recall. Some of you may recall some of those discussions. Under the parking code update, what occurred during codification, it appeared that the covered parking requirement was omitted. So we'd like to reinstate that requirement in the R1, R2, and residential canyon zones. Item number 2, the manufacturing zone. We'd like to fix some of the cross references with the commercial zone. At the time, the council determined to focus their effort only on the parking code update and commercial code update. We did have an ordinance already prepared to fix those cross references, but we were directed to wait until we had the other 2 items approved, which are now approved, and we're coming back to correct those changes. We also had, as part of that prior council discussion, to remove the municipal minor conditional use permit requirement for arbors and decorative features in the front yard. Currently, there is a process. You can have a small decorative arbor in the front yard if it doesn't exceed 10 feet, but it would require a minor conditional use permit. So since there are a number of properties in town that do have decorative arbors and other features in the front yard exceeding 10 feet, and with council concurrence at the time, we decided to allow that by right and remove the minor conditional use permit requirement. Staff is also proposing to add an administrative design review permit process to reduce the prevailing front yard setback to 25 feet under certain circumstances. Currently, if a street face, and we're looking at a corner property, the street face had setbacks greater than 25 feet, but perhaps there was one adjacent to a corner lot at 25 feet. That 25-foot corner setback at that corner lot would also be required to meet the comply with the prevailing side yard setback, which is also 25 feet. So we were thinking under certain circumstances that we could provide the ADRP to reduce that requirement. Number 5 is to amend the setbacks for attached garages in the R3 zone to be 3 feet from the side and rear property lines, which is the same requirement for detached garages in the R zone. So we're just trying to achieve parity between the 2 zones. And number 6 is to amend the hillside management zone language that includes RH references to omit confusion between hillside designation and high density designation in multifamily zones. So it's just a bit of cleanup in that effort. Number 7 on the next slide is to include an administrative design review process for height restrictions, also to achieve parity in other residential zones and the management zone, hillside management zone, and also to require licensed design professionals for reviewing or for processing ADRP, administrative design review permits, and hillside development permits. Next slide. The next category, that was the 3rd category that the Planning Commission was considering, and they moved these 2 items out of the general updates because they thought it needed further discussion and a little bit more analysis. But the staff proposal is to remove the discretionary demolition permit requirement for properties that are over 75 years old, but have already had a historic resource evaluation that determined that it is not eligible either architectural or cultural designations. So what this would do is for those properties with an historic status code of 6Z, meaning that it has no historic or cultural significance, we would eliminate the discretionary demolition permit, thereby saving the applicant about $1,200 in return for that. All other properties 75 years of age that are proposing additions and that are eligible would still go through the discretionary demolition permit process. And the second component of this is to allow selected properties that are less than 75 years of age to participate in the historic landmark designation process. And I wanted to bring up two properties in particular. One was designated at 500 Mariposa Avenue at the corner of Park and Mariposa. That's less than 75 years of age. It is a landmark, and it's also eligible for state landmark designation as a mid-century modern aesthetic. Another property that has been raised in the community is the 505 North Hermosa, the Wisteria house, one of the properties with the Wisteria vine. And this would allow us also to consider designating that property, of course, with the owner consent, as an architectural landmark. It qualifies as a high-style mid-century modern design. It is less than 75 years of age. And we could also possibly consider as a cultural landmark the Wisteria vine, inclusive of that process. So the Planning Commission wanted to have further deliberations on both of these concepts. The last section is suggestions from the Planning Commission. And of course, we still need to implement the R2 Municipal Code text amendments. That is one of our residential zones that have not been amended in many years. And also to address the number of new code requirements in the R3 multiple family code updates. So we need to go back and look at some of those standards. We are doing some of that as part of the housing element. That'll also be coming forward to the Planning Commission at a public hearing at their next meeting as well. The next item, the Planning Commission suggested to reduce the maximum allowed floor area in all residential zones by 800 square feet. And that is to offset the development of ADUs. By state law, we have to approve an ADU at 800 square feet. They are allowed to go up to 1,200 square feet, but the minimum square footage is 800 square feet. What this would entail is if a property had a allowed maximum floor area of 3,500 square feet, the concept is to reduce that to 2,700 square feet so that in the future, we would allow that same allowed floor area inclusive of an ADU. So that is still under consideration by the Planning Commission. And it's also, all of these suggestions are up to the City Council to direct the commission as how to proceed. Number 3 is to consider pre-approved ADUs. We can do that in 2 ways. The commission looked at some other cities, and they, some of them do have city purchased plans that are ready to go. City of Los Angeles and City of San Jose are 2 examples. And it was also suggested to contract directly with architects to streamline the process. So that'll allow the applicant to kind of pick and choose pre-designed plans or to streamline the process with an architectural list that is recommended by the city. Number 4 is the development of objective standards and guidelines for residential and commercial zones. As you may recall, it is no longer allowed to have subjective standards. We currently still have subjective standards for our design review administrative design review processes because we have not changed those. But if we do, then we will lose the subjective component of those findings. So it was suggested by the commission that we develop objective standards and guidelines, and that could also would have to be sole sourced out to, or not sole sourced, but contracted with possibly an architect or another firm to help staff develop those objective standards and guidelines that would be applicable for both residential and commercial zones. Number 5 is also was suggested by the commission is to create a list of qualified arborists for applicants to select from, or source an arborist through a contract with the city. And that's very similar what we do with the historic resource evaluation reports. We source that contract specifically with Sappho's Environmental, and it has been very successful and reduced costs to the applicant overall. Of course, the 5 items that I just mentioned above is all dependent upon staff resources and potential budget allocation, especially for the development of objective standards and guidelines. So the next slide, the council does have the ability to approve the recommended list as presented. The council could modify that list and direct the planning commission to begin implementation as directed, or continue the matter and provide direction to staff and the planning commission. Staff is recommending on the next slide that the city council proceed with the recommended list of municipal code text amendments for implementation in calendar year 2022 by the planning commission. That concludes my presentation.
Well, thank you very much for a comprehensive presentation, Director Gonzalez. I'm sure we're going to have plenty of questions, and I think maybe to open up questioning on this, there are actually kind of 3 different parts to this. I think maybe to make this go a little smoother, I'd like to maybe get us to focus on the first 5 municipal code text amendments. Maybe if we have questions on that, if we could then move on to the cleanup and then finally to the suggestions. So if do any of my colleagues have questions on the first 5?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Krebs.
I actually had a more overall question.
Oops, that's fine.
Director Gonzalez, is the order in which you presented them categorically meant to represent the prioritization as well, or is it more the prioritization within each category?
It's generally the overall prioritization beginning with state mandates.
Okay, thank you.
Other general questions or on the first 5? Okay, hearing none. How about questions having to do with the ordinance cleanup?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilmember Parkhurst.
So the 17.40, the manufacturing zone, Director Gonzalez, can you tell us a little bit about what some of the fixes and cross references that are made for that one?
Essentially what occurred was when the commercial zone was updated, what we always have to do when we do an ordinance amendment is we start looking for cross references that are referring back to, in this case, the underlying zone of the commercial zone. So currently the manufacturing zone and the commercial zone cross references are not in sync. So the manufacturing zone might reference a certain section in 17.40 that is no longer in parity.
Thank you.
Any other questions on ordinance cleanup?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilmember Krebs.
This goes to my first question. I mean, it would seem to me that cleanup, wouldn't be, if fireworks are prioritized, wouldn't be at the top of the list like this. I assume that part of the reason why this appears towards the top is that this is not particularly cumbersome or requiring a lot of resources. And I think you said some of it's already been done in prior efforts. And so this is just a matter of kind of cleaning things out, and it won't really take much time away from what I would think, for example, the planning commission suggestions might be more substantively, prioritized.
That's correct. A lot of the language has already been drafted.
Okay. Now, questions from the remaining issues at hand. Well, I have one. Getting down to commissioner suggestions. Item number 2. How does that benefit our residents to have their potential of the size house they build decreased if they have the option of getting an ADU?
Well, that would depend if that resident had the desire to develop an ADU. I think the concept by the Planning Commission in this case was to offset the floor area to encourage the development of ADUs so we can actually capture them. For those residents who do not have an interest in developing an ADU, it's basically reducing their allowed floor area that they would be able to have today.
So it's kind of prioritizing people who might be interested in doing an ADU.
Yes.
Okay.
Mayor, may I follow up on that?
Yes, Councilmember Parkhurst.
So that means at the point that you're building a house, then you have to make a decision then whether or not you'll have an ADU.
That would be correct.
And so then 3 owners later, does that prohibit that new owner from developing an ADU?
It wouldn't prohibit the new owner from developing an ADU. What it might do is still allow them to add on to the house up to that 800 square feet or move forward with an ADU. They could do either.
And what's our maximum allowed floor area for some of the key zones, R1, R2, RH?
So R1, 3,500 square feet would be on the top end, and it's all tiered based on lot size.
Okay.
And 3,500 square feet with the design review permit, you can exceed 3,500 square feet, and it's based on increments of that lot size.
So the smallest lot in town can have a 3,500 square foot house on it?
No, the smallest, say a 7,500 square foot lot or smaller can have 2,500 square feet.
Okay.
A larger lot up to 11,000 square feet could have 3,500 square feet, but then it's an increment of 10% for every 1,000 square feet in addition of that lot area.
So if you've got that 750 square, what was it, 750?
7,500 square foot lot.
Thank you, 7,500 square foot lot. You're allowed a 2,500 square foot home. You take 800 off of that, that means you have a 1,700 square foot house.
That's what would occur, yes.
Okay. I do have a general question that came on my mind, if I may. You'd mentioned about creating objective design review standards, and that we have to, if we amend the design review process, that has to be objective. Will any of the items that we have in any of the categories tonight impact the subjective design review standards that we have today?
On any of the other the other ordinance amendments that we discussed today?
That's
correct. It would, because a lot of the earlier items that I talked about are ministerial in action now. So for instance, even the urban lot splits that I mentioned for single family residential that allows you to split that single family lot into 2 lots and build up to 2 duplexes or a duplex on each lot, newly created lot, a total of 4 units. That would be fee simple, so those would be for sale, or they would be for sale units, residential units. That would be ministerial in action. We would not be able to apply our design review standards to that currently.
So we have to develop objective design review standards in order to comply with the current set of laws, including SB 9.
Yes, that way what we would be doing is saying these are our objective design standards. It would be something that would be just like we have in our zoning standards, maximum height, setbacks. If we go look at in terms of design, maybe offsets in plane, we might be able to impose. And the city attorney could also expand on this concept as well.
Thank you, Director. I was just going to add that formerly, the way design was controlled in the city was through these, whether it was design review permit or the hillside development permit, and these had discretionary subjective components. Because we can't control design in the city using subjective or discretionary components, now we're trying to control design in the city through just very objective development and design standards, which we currently don't have in the code. All the design standards that we have, while we do have design and development standards, a lot of the way developments look was controlled through the discretionary process. So because of these new housing laws, we want to make sure that Sierra Madre has that certain aesthetic, and in order to preserve that, we need to do that by adopting objective design and development standards.
Thank you. And remind me where the objective design review standards are. Are they in the commissioner suggestions?
Yes, they are.
And what number in the commissioner suggestions are they?
They are on in the staff report.
Well, that's another question, but
yeah.
Sure, let's use the staff report.
So those commissioner suggestions are on page 4 of your staff report.
Yeah, and which number is it? Because I'm trying to read it and I'm missing it.
So yes, because the presentation, I kind of combined a few things, and you're looking at 1 through 7 in the staff report under commissioner suggestions. So that would be number 4, development guidelines and standards booklet. Number 5, design guidelines, standards and commercial zone, and design review for multifamily, including commercial zone, mixed use projects, and other city or other additional objective standards. So all of those are really could be handled under one booklet utilizing commercial, mixed use, and residential.
So if the current laws are really driving us to create objective design review standards, why are these the 3 of the lowest 4 in commissioner suggestions? So they're like the very tail end of suggestions. There's some logic here that I'm missing. Is I'd imagine that these would be near the top of the list since we kind of have to do them to comply with state law. What am I missing?
No, certainly it's the city council's purview to reorder these priority lists. That's the reason we are bringing this forward. I think one of the reasons why the commission identified the R2 and R3 code updates as one of the priorities, especially for R2, that's an ordinance that has not been amended for many, many years. And we have been pushing that on the back burner for quite some time. The R3 code updates, we can utilize a lot of the concepts in the R3 code updates in R2. So it shouldn't be that complex. R3 code updates, as I mentioned in the presentation, are also being considered as part of the housing element updates that we're moving forward with at our next meeting. And City Council will be seeing some of those specific changes specific to the religious housing overlay, and the other R20 and R30 development standards. So since we're updating those, we wanted to update the R13 standards.
And just one final question. So is there a reason for the DDPs to be higher in priority than some of the commissioner suggestions, or is this just kind of the grouping that was in the report?
That was just the grouping of the mix. Certainly, if the city council believes that the development objective standards and guidelines are certainly a priority, it's under your purview to make that priority.
Councilor Parkhurst, I'll also note that's it's going to be a relatively complex process. I imagine that it would take something like a year to develop that. I know a number of cities are moving in that direction now. The city of Encinitas just adopted their objective development standards, and they contracted with a separate firm that does that work. I think it took them about 6 months, and it's a 50-page document. It's a big document, so it's a relatively complex task.
Thank you for that clarification.
Okay, are there any other questions?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem.
I believe I have two. First one, I believe, is for Director Gonzalez. Under Commissioner suggestions, which is what we're talking about, item 3 regarding the consideration of pre-approved ADU plans to be purchased or contracted with an architect to streamline the process. Is the spirit of that bullet point that those are the only two options, or we want to encourage those two options in order to streamline approval?
There could be many more options. These were suggestions by one of our planning commissioners and pointed to these two cities. And then the discussion went about if that's too cumbersome, then maybe to streamline the process, we contract with architects either in town or in the surrounding community that are working on, we see ADU permits being processed by their offices.
And to add to that, just like our design review permits, we don't have discretionary design review over ADUs. So by providing set plans, it would help us control the design of ADUs so that we have good designs in the city.
Thank you. And finally, item 7, that's on page 4 of the staff report regarding the arborist. I just want to, maybe this is a question for City Attorney Garagosian, but I want to make sure I have an understanding, because Director Gonzalez, you mentioned our historic review. That sounds like a fact-finding expedition, right? But as far as arborists are concerned, I feel like there's got to be some type of subjectivity. I watched the December 2nd Planning Commission meeting recently, and I know that was when this came up, at least one of the times. And maybe one arborist says that getting rid of trunk 4 is okay, and someone else says it's not. So that being said, I want to make sure that that's something we can do, because a lot of the work that's done by the city or contracted by the city with city funds will have to go out for an RFP. There has to be a competitive bidding process. But for us to say, this is the arborist that we choose, legally, is that something we can do?
So again, I'm gonna defer Director Gonzalez on this, because I can address the legal aspect of it, but the process by which we would contract with an arborist, I think if we're going to sole source it, it would mirror the process that we went through for the historian. And Director Gonzalez, if you could just outline for us what the process was for sole sourcing with the historian.
Yes, we prepared a request for a proposal and allowed individuals to submit applications. We evaluated each of them in a matrix, looking at their qualifications. Many of them did fall off the qualifying list because they were not certified by the Secretary of the Interior Standards, which was a requirement. So that limited and reduced the pool considerably. Then we based it upon the number of staff they have, how long they've been doing this, other experts in the office, and ultimately what their bid was for the proposal. So we did take a lower bid.
And again, Councilmember Garcia, that there are really three ways I think to go about this. One is just to leave it to the market and have the applicant choose whoever he wants or she wants. The second is to create a limited pool so the applicant can choose from 2, 3, 4 different arborists. And the third option is the sole sourcing option. The advantage of the sole sourcing option is threefold. One, as a result of sole sourcing, we could probably bring the price down. We can negotiate a lower price. So the applicant ultimately benefits from the sole sourcing because there's one person that's going to do it for the entire city and he's going to charge set amount. The second benefit would be, and this goes for limiting the pool as well as sole sourcing, is you know the quality of the product. I think a lot of the time the Planning Commission keeps second guessing some of our arborists, not because they themselves are arborists, but because they've heard such wildly different opinions between arborists when they're confronted with relatively the same fact pattern. So they're struggling with some of these arborist reports and they want to make sure that the quality is consistent and good. And the third issue is bias. There's a concern that if the applicant is the one paying for the arborist report, they might control what's in the arborist report. Whereas if the city is the one who predetermines who the arborists are going to be, then the arborist has an incentive to make sure that their report keeps the city's interests in mind, or they can be removed from the list. I know Analyst Carlson also had some thoughts about this. If you'd like to share, you may have some more input.
Oh, thank you, City Attorney Garagosian. I really just kind of wanted to watch and see how this discussion unfolded. I indicated to Director Gonzalez that I'd be more than happy to provide a list of arborists, which I've had really good experiences with.
Thank you. And just as a follow-up, and this might be Vincent, Director Gonzalez, or Management Analyst Carlson, but for myself, maybe other council members and public, what would trigger a report from an arborist?
Sure. That's something that we take a look at the Public Works desk. Generally, plans are submitted to Community Preservation and Planning. A quick check, they come to Public Works for items such as a city engineer, low impact development, demolition requirements. And the one thing I always look at is the tree and what's the proximity of any protected species to construction activity. And then I will generally comment that you need a full arborist report or an abridged arborist report, depending on that situation. And I have like a checklist of items that I can provide the applicant, and so the arborist knows what he's required to do.
So just to clarify, that would be, so a situation where demolition was requested or some type of expansion construction is requested, then that would trip the need for an arborist report?
No, not necessarily. The arborist report is solely based on the location of protected species and how close it is to construction activity. It could be demolition activity, it could be grading activity, it could be building and construction activity. And then the parkway trees are all considered protected as well. So ingress and egress during the project are something that we would look at.
So specific, I just want to, I'm trying to pull it out, specific to protected trees. That's our concern. Okay.
Yeah, and each project is looked at separately in relation to where the location of protected trees are. They could even be the neighbor's tree that have to be considered, but that's what I specifically look for.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions on discussion item 1?
Mr. Mayor, can I just follow up on that question?
Councilmember Arizmendi, please.
Yeah, so if I'm understanding this correctly, the arborist, the number 7, can be initiated by staff and finalized by the commission. Would that be an accurate statement or question? I guess maybe statement.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, well, that concludes council questioning. I'd like to see if we have public comment on discussion item 1. Mr. Milan?
Yes, Mayor, please stand by while we check participants and allow them a minute to raise their hands.
Okay. We'll be patient.
Mayor, at this time, it does not appear anybody wishes to make public comment.
Okay, thank you. So we'll bring it back to the council, and I'd like to kind of first figure out how we should proceed with it. There's a lot of moving parts here. And I don't know, do we want to talk about an up or down on everything? Do we want to take this apart item by item? I'd like to get your ideas on that before we actually get into the specifics.
Mr. Mayor, may I take a stab at it?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Director Gonzalez, for putting this together. I know we have approached this somewhat in the same way in the past, but to me, this seems very comprehensive to see just kind of a road map for what the Planning Commission can be working on. And to see the state mandates, I think that's going to be the most urgent. And Councilmember Creeves asked the question that I had too, is this in priority order? But now it makes sense. You have your state mandates we need to align with. We have the cleanup. And I think to have these listed in front of us is extremely important. We know that in the past couple of years, there are some pieces that we missed and the cleanup took a little bit longer and a lot more difficult to correct as the longer we waited. So I think this is a really great practice that I'd like to see us continue doing. Appreciate seeing the commissioner's suggestions and the consideration of the pre-approved ADUs is, I think all of us recall during our housing element, we kept saying, why can't we increase our arena numbers with the ADUs? And maybe this will help accelerate that and help us meet our numbers sooner rather than later. Really appreciate hearing that the Planning Commission is reconsidering the objective reviews again, because I know we've had some conversations about that in the past, but I think there's a little bit more urgency due to some of the changes at the state level. And it's a very ambitious list. At the same time, I know that there are things that need to get done. So applause and kudos to our Planning Commission for being willing to tackle this. But I think the way it's presented today makes sense as to how we move forward with the Planning Commission. I like to see this move forward as presented, with maybe the slight modification that maybe if we can move up the arborist list as opposed to being number 7 in the very last item, is if it can be initiated by staff and brought to Planning Commission when ready. I think that's going to help alleviate some of the anticipation we'll have with some of our projects in this upcoming year.
Okay. Who'd like to go next?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilmember Creeves.
I'm generally in agreement with Councilmember Arizmendi's comments. I would just say that part of my suggestion would be, given that we would likely outsource the development of the objective design standards, that it would be obviously important to understand, what that cost looks like, whether it's in the budget, whether it's going to be in next year's budget. That to me seems important, an important consideration as to where it falls on the list, because while I know outsourcing does reduce some of the burden on our staff, not entirely, but also obviously then has the monetary component. So I think that's important to consider where that falls into the overall list. And we don't need to decide that tonight, but it seems to me that that's an important piece of information that we would want to look at before deciding where it goes on the priority list.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councilmember Parkhurst.
So I'm in general agreement with Councilmembers Creeves and Arizmendi. A couple of things. I think that the DDRP, I'm not sure that that's, I think that the commission's suggestions might be higher priority than that. I would tend to agree that we could bring the list of arborists forward, because that could be relatively easy. And then I do think that the objective design review standards are very important. On the arborists specifically, on the 2 options that we were presented, I tend to lean towards having multiple arborists available instead of one city arborist. I understand that the one city gives us a lower price, but based on what I've seen at the Planning Commission, trees are a little bit like, cutting down a tree is a little bit like having a surgery. You often want to get a second opinion on it. And so having multiple arborists to choose from, I think it's important for you to be able to see those differences in opinion. And I think that having that list will give us a high quality list of folks. I like the idea of the pre-approved ADUs. I think it just makes it really simple. I've heard this described, having those plans right there, you can go and get them and go build the ADU. I think that makes a lot of sense. I'm perplexed on the 800 square foot, the description of the 7,500 square foot lot size and a 2,500 square foot house, which then is reduced down to 1,700 square feet. That's a house on the smaller side. I mean, it's a decent starter home. But that just, and it seems like, I'm not sure that restriction, we could not have that 800 square foot. And so that now we're impinging on the size of the lot. So I'd like to send that one back for a little bit more discussion and a little bit more thought. I mean, I don't have an easy answer, but it just seems kind of hard on the lower end of the lot size spectrum. And that's all my comments.
Okay. And Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes, yeah, I concur with what I've been hearing so far. Specifically, Councilman Parkhurst talking about a list of arborists. I think that would probably be beneficial. I know, again, the cost might be a little bit higher, but one of my earlier comments was there might be some subjectivity, not always a fact-finding mission, right? So to have a second opinion regarding something that's living, I think is important. So I would like to see a list and see that moved up. And I do like the order of how things are presented to us. Still not completely familiar with the DDP requirements and why some recommendations that could go behind the commissioner's suggestions. It seems rather important from the text I'm reading here. But again, this is a very ambitious list, and I commend the Planning Commission and everybody that has been working on that, and they're throwing out more suggestions for more work for themselves, and I do appreciate that. So I'm of like mind with the council.
Okay, I am too. I like just a fantastic report. I like the prioritization. I do agree with Councilmember Krebs about sending a message back maybe to the Planning Commission about the developmental guidelines and standards, design guidelines. I think those things should be a little higher priority, but they may not get to them. As you say, this is very ambitious. I also, as I mentioned earlier in my questioning, I also think it's punitive to tell our property owners that now they can build a house that's 800 square feet less than what they could before this. I'd like to see more discussion on that. I don't think I've heard a justification for it. Maybe I'll go there if I hear something more compelling, but right now I oppose that one item, but I would approve everything else. I like your comments, Mayor Pro Tem, on the arborist. I agree. I think you really have to have more than one arborist involved when you have something. You could have a very old and very important tree. You really don't want to take any chances with that. So I'd like to get a motion and see if we could get it's typically the chair doesn't make motions in parliamentary procedure, so I'm not going to. I'd like to see a motion to accept this with item 2 modified to ask for future more discussion.
Can I ask a process question?
Yes, please.
My understanding was that this item was just to approve the prioritization of the discussion of these items, and that we're not actually approving any of these things. So that this is just the first step in a process where we'll have public hearing and additional discussion about most of this.
Right.
Just to make sure that I'm understanding correctly.
That's correct, Director Gonzalez, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Can I ask a follow-up kind of on the discussion? So I understand Mayor Pro Tem's discussion on the DDRP, that is, there seems to be some urgency around it. Director Gonzalez, can you tell us like how many homes are being impacted by the DDRP and compared to how many are being impacted, say, by some of the commissioner suggestions, say that R2, R3, or the design review? That's what I'm trying to wrap my head around, that because I'm still feeling like this is an ambitious list, and I kind of lean towards pushing that one a little bit further back, particularly because you said R2, R3 keeps getting pushed back, and maybe we need to move that one up. Am I missing something there?
No, we do. Many of our applications, especially for additions, are required to go through the discretionary demolition permit process. But the first stage of that is they have to get an historic resource evaluation. So if that historic resource evaluation comes back and that property is not eligible, there really is no reason for them to pay $1,200 for a discretionary demolition permit. So that's the basic premise behind this. And it would be a fairly easy correction. The second component of the discretionary demolition permit, by reducing or considering selected properties that are not 75 years of age to be allowed to be designated as a landmark, that would require a little bit more discussion with the Planning Commission to further refine that consideration.
Would having those on there impact your ability to get, say, to the R2, R3?
I think we can always, as part of the general cleanup, we can include that as more of a general cleanup, or make that a more priority on the list. To get that ongoing. That's why I think it was identified here as the #1 item. Suggestions from the Planning Commission.
Okay, thank you. So I think we have from Councilmember Arizmendi, you haven't made a motion yet, but you took a very clear position that you're in favor of this. You want to go ahead and do that?
Sure, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to make the motion to accept the priority list as presented, but with the modification of pulling #2 in the commissioner's suggestion, and I'm trying to think if we should put that last on the priority list and/or to pull for further discussion, and for item #7 to be initiated by staff with the priority of bringing multiple arborists for consideration to Planning Commission for recommendation.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Can I just make sure I understand the motion on the table? So what are we saying with item 2 is to come back with more discussion on it? Councilmember Arizmendi, is that your intent with the motion?
Well, I was trying to pull it to determine, and maybe let's put it last and maybe have further discussion for it and to determine if it stays on the priority list.
Okay.
My second still carries.
Okay, your second is still good. All right. We have a motion and a second. Madam City Clerk, would you mind taking the roll? You're muted. You're muted.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The motion made by Councilmember Arizmendi and seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Garcia. Mr. Mayor, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Garcia?
Aye.
Councilmember Arizmendi?
Aye.
Councilmember Creeps?
Aye.
And Councilmember Parkhurst?
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You have a unanimous voice vote.
Clerk. Okay, that moves us on to discussion item #2 on the California Public Utilities Commission changes to net energy metering. This should be a very interesting presentation. I've been looking forward to it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be taking this discussion tonight. This discussion concerns the California Public Utilities Commission's proposed changes to net energy metering. This program provides financial incentives for customers to install renewable energy systems in their homes. Most often, these are rooftop solar systems. The City Council requested a discussion on this topic as several residents have raised concerns about the proposed changes. There are a number of key issues being considered under this new proposal. This is being referred to as NEM 3.0. So the main ones are export compensation that would amend the rate of financial credits for surplus energy fed back into the grid. This would be amended from a retail rate to actual avoided cost, which would be significantly lower. In addition, there is the grid participation charge. That is $8 per kilowatt of solar capacity installed. That averages to about $48 to $56 per month for most customers. In addition, there is also legacy treatment. So this would reduce the period for which customers can receive financial credits from 20 years to 15 years. And that would also include a retroactive reduction for existing solar owners. They also included incentives for low-income customers. So low-income customers would be exempt from this proposed grid participation charge, and they would also receive larger market transition credits that would get them used to the changes in the solar market. The city of Sierra Madre in particular is in an interesting position because we purchased our power through the Clean Power Alliance, and they have their own NEM program that is not subject to the CPUC proceeding. However, the passage of that proceeding could impact the CPA's own competitive position and also set precedents for the CPA's future redesigns of its own program. And in addition to that, Sierra Madre residents also do have the ability to opt out of using CPA power. And if they did so and have rooftop solar, they would be subject to these changes under the CPUC proceeding. This proposal is currently progressing through the CPUC's rulemaking process. They were scheduled to vote on this January 27th. Due to a lot of public response, this has been delayed indefinitely in order to further analyze and consider revisions to this decision. In the interim, it's being recommended that the City Council direct the Energy, Environment, and Natural Resources Commission to to discuss these proposed changes and to provide a recommendation to the City Council on how to proceed, given that they have the expertise and we have more time to make a more nuanced decision on this proceeding. And with that, I'm happy to answer any additional questions you all may have.
Thank you, Management Analyst Konatsky. Very, very clear report. I'm guessing we're going to get some interest here from Councilmember Parkhurst. Maybe I'd like to let him go first, as Clean Power Alliance was brought into the discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I have two questions. Analyst Kowanowski, so what's the impact between interconnection and power generation in the CPUC's proposed decision?
Sorry, could you clarify that question?
So what's the difference in fees between interconnection and power generation for the
Sure.
NEM 3.0?
Sure, so they are charging a general interconnection participation charge that is $8 per square foot. And then if you're looking at that generation charge, so any export compensation, any surplus energy that is fed back into the grid, currently solar owners receive an average of 22 to 36 cents per kilowatt hour of electricity generated. And moving that down to actual avoided costs reduces that credit to about 4.5 to 5.5 cents per kilowatt hour. So that's quite a significant reduction.
So is it, thank you very much. So is it correct to say that no matter who you get your energy from, whether it's Southern California Edison or the Clean Power Alliance, the interconnection fee that you've got will be the same. It will not change. It is set by the CPUC. Is that accurate?
That part has been pretty unclear. Currently, that interconnection charge would be through statewide, regardless of CPA versus CPUC general state utilities. But if the CPA decides to amend their own NEM program, that could change as well.
Okay. Okay. And then my last question then is how many cities and counties in the state have adopted resolutions against the NEM 3.0? And can you give us a list of those?
Yes. So there are 11 cities that have put out resolutions against it. So these are San Diego, Berkeley, Imperial Beach, Richmond, some more local ones, Palm Springs, Carlsbad, Hot Springs, and then only quite a few counties. So that's Santa Cruz and Mendocino counties. Quite a few individual council members and mayors across the state, probably in the 100 plus, have put out their own individual letters of support or opposition, correction.
Okay, other questions?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilmember Creeps.
Thank you so much for this. This is really laid out in a nice way, much actually clearer than the article in the LA Times that I read about it. So congratulations. One question I had was, in terms of, you mentioned at the beginning that there were multiple proposals for this, NEM 3.0, but it seems to me that the one everyone is focusing on is the one that was proposed by the IOUs. Is that because that's the sense that the CPUC was actually giving that, more serious consideration, or just because it's, sort of figured that would be kind of the one that would rise to the top given its sponsors? Or is there any sense of whether some of these similar problems exist in the other proposals that were provided?
Sure, yeah. So there were 18 proposals sent to the CPUC, and essentially the CPUC's NEM 3.0 program that they proposed had the largest, fell most in line with the big three utilities proposal. So it took individual ideas, but it was most in line with the big three proposal.
Got it, thank you.
Okay, other questions? Okay, hearing none, I think we'll thank you, Management Konatsky. I'd like to see if we have any public comment on this item before we have a discussion.
Mr. Mayor, that was a second just to verify if anyone would like to speak. It does not appear anyone would like to speak at this time, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. I'm kind of surprised at that, honestly. I think this is a pretty significant public policy issue. I don't know if we have a whole lot of influence over it, but certainly I'd like to hear what the council has to say about it, what you think we might want to do, if anything.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, please, Councilmember Parkhurst.
So from what I understand on what this proposed decision is trying to do, it's trying to encourage or level the ability to install solar. And so, historically, people with more income or more wealth could install solar on their homes. And what that happens is that interconnection fee then is met by a smaller and smaller population. And so it's shifted down the income spectrum and put on middle and lower income utility customers. So I understand where the PUC is coming from on this. I think it's unfortunately poorly thought out, at least in what I understand. We've got the Public Resources Code in the state that states that it's state policy to establish a self-sufficient solar industry in which solar energy systems are a viable mainstream option for both homes and businesses. And then what this decision will do is it will take what is now a 5-year payback on a solar system and turn it to a 19-year payback. Overall, customers would see that their energy revenue, the energy money they save on this will drop by almost $700 a year, $675 a year. And just the interconnection fee for a Sierra Madre resident would be about $38. This takes us from the leadership role and puts us down at the really bottom. And so I think it's problematic overall. I hear exactly what you're saying, Mr. Mayor, is that we don't have a huge impact to do this, but I do think having the Natural Resources Commission look at it and provide a recommendation back to us. And I think it's worth us considering joining in with those 11 cities and opposing it. We're blessed with a good climate here. The mountains here give us a lot of clear days, and we have a southern exposure, which makes it easier for folks to put solar on. So I think that this is an opportunity for us to dig in more detail in it and to have our voices heard, along with some of those other cities that are weighing in on this.
Other comments?
Mr. Mayor.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, I see the two huge issues with this. One, it disincentivizes anybody of means to have solar, right? And that's a big issue. And two, it takes away with the legacy treatment, it's taking away something that they promised, right? Or at least some of it. And that's bad policy that breeds distrust within governmental agencies. So taking the legacy treatment and reducing the number of years, that's just plain unfair. So those two overarching issues give me issue with this. And I think ENER is obviously the right commission to take a look at this and give us a recommendation on how to proceed, or as far as our voices heard.
And any other comments?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Creeves.
I mean, I agree that I think that the Natural Resources Commission is exactly the right place for this. And I would, offer the suggestion to that commission that they perhaps invite the Clean Power Alliance to come and talk a little bit about the issue that was raised in the staff report, that for the vast majority of our city who's not receiving power directly through through Edison, kind of what the potential follow-on impacts might be, because unless you're opting out on the face of it at the moment, this is not affecting you. But I appreciate the point made that it may affect what the CPA does in the future. So I'd be interested to hear from them kind of what they're looking towards, depending on which way this goes. If this were to pass, what they think that the domino effect would be on their plan and their policy.
Any other comments? Well, I'll chime in. I pretty much agree with everything Councilmember Parker said and Mayor Pro Tem said, going along the lines of how this is just bad governance. They're pulling the rug out from underneath a very successful program. A lot of private citizens have made huge investments in good faith with penciling out a specific payoff date, and now we're going to extend it by 3 or 4 times. So it seems like a really, really impactful kind of policy change. Will we have any influence at all? I mean, if we take the time to drop this down to commission, which is obviously the right commission, will we be able to have some kind of product in time for them to make a decision? I'm just kind of wondering about that. Management Analyst Kanowski, could you give us a take on that?
Yes, I would say that there would definitely be time, given that the CPUC hasn't made a decision yet, and the next ENER meeting is next Wednesday, so they could potentially discuss it as early as that.
Perfect, thank you. So I don't think we need to take a vote on. From what I'm hearing, we're all comfortable with this going to ENR and waiting for them to come back to us with a recommendation. Are there any, I think we're all in agreement. We don't need to vote, right? We're just giving you guys direction here. Correct? Management Analyst Kanowski, we're just giving you direction here, right?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. Good enough. Then I think we'll move on to the next item. Discussion item number 3, which has to do with the issue of authorizing hybrid and fully remote teleconferencing meetings for another 30 days. I'd like to hear what staff has to say about that. I think I know already.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Goss. So in order to meet in a hybrid or fully remote format, state law requires the City Council to adopt an authorizing resolution. One such resolution was adopted on January 11th. Those resolutions are statutorily set to expire within 30 days. So that January 11th resolution will expire on the 10th of this month. If we want to maintain the option to meet either in a hybrid or fully remote format, we'll have to adopt a new resolution.
Any questions? Okay, thank you, City Attorney Grossian.
Mr. Mayor, if I have a question?
Yes, real quick, go ahead.
Yeah, real quick. So we had said we were going to do hybrid in the past, but we haven't done hybrid. And I see that Director Milan is on. I think he may be able to answer this. Is what's been the challenge for us having hybrid options for meetings?
Thank you, Councilmember Parkhurst. So at the core of the issue is simply limitations of our council chambers. We have a technology in play in the council chambers that is outdated and is in much need of an upgrade. That said, we have looked at other options, and we believe we have a solution in play that would allow us to conduct the meetings in hybrid format. I will clarify that there are unique challenges as we look for a solution, primarily that it appears that we want to try to accomplish 2 types of hybrid participations. And that's an important distinction because a lot of our neighboring cities are only essentially doing one type of hybrid, which is the hybrid of public participation that allows folks to come in person, make a comment, or also join the meeting via Zoom or any type of video conference. What we are trying to accomplish is that, plus the hybrid participation of council as well, which presents a combined set of challenges to do both. That said, I believe we do have a working solution, and we think that we can make it happen for the next normal meeting.
Thank you, IT Manager Milan. Any other questions? Okay, I think we need to hear public comment on this. If we have any, back to IT Manager Milan.
Mayor, we're just giving folks a minute to chime in.
Okay.
Mayor, I don't see anyone raising their hands. It does not look like we have any public comment on this item.
Okay, thank you. So this looks pretty cut and dry. Or any questions or comments?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem.
Just for the pleasure of the community, just because we could potentially approve this doesn't mean that we are going to go hybrid forever or for 30 days or go exclusively remote. This just gives us the option to do so. So I just want to make sure that that's understood.
Right, and I'd like to add to that we have the option to go back live anytime we want to. And as the virus trends downward, that may very well be the case here in the very near future. But yeah, that's very important for people to know that we're not signing on to this for forever. It's just to help us through this difficult time. Other comments?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilmember Creeves.
I just wanted to say that given the difficulties outlined by Director Milan around the sort of dual hybrid approach, I would offer up that, to the extent that I feel like the purpose of this is to allow for the broadest participation by the public, I would be fine with council remaining, remote, if that creates an easier transition into a hybrid situation where the public is given, as many options as possible to participate and provide comment. So if that, it makes things more seamless and makes things easier for staff and easier for the public, I think we could dispense with, second hybrid option. And, in my opinion, and I would be willing to do that if that would facilitate a more seamless process.
Thank you, Councilmember Creeves. Other comments? Going once, going twice? Sold. So how do we want to handle that? Are you comfortable, Councilmember Creeves, if we go ahead and approve this and leave the discretion in the hands of the city manager to continue on Zoom if we have to? We haven't.
Yeah, yes, of course. I was just sort of offering that up as perhaps even a third option, if that again is making. I don't want to make things too hard on staff either to achieve something that we could achieve from the public's perspective if it required a little bit of sacrifice from the council.
Well, I agree with you. I trust staff here. We've got really good people on this, and I think they've come up with a plan. I think they knew it was our priority, and they've got some more time to work on it. And I'd like to be assured that they're going to be able to pull this off, and without putting themselves at, creating a problem, So I agree with you that we should give them staff as much discretion here as possible. But leave this open as an option for them by passing this motion. Any other comments?
I just want to thank IT Director Milan. I know that he's worked really hard to make this happen, and he's one of the people that it's all behind the scenes until things go really bad.
Right.
So I just want to extend my appreciation because he makes things run so smooth for us all the time.
Yeah, well, these Zoom meetings are a testament to that, among other things. Yeah.
Mayor, I just want to thank you for that. And our goal, again, with the hybrid approach is to have council present at City Council, at City Hall, allow for public participation, and also give those residents who are still uncomfortable attending the meeting in person with an avenue to participate in our meetings. So what we'll be doing in the future is including this item as a consent item on the agenda, and we'll reconsider it every 30 days moving forward.
Thank you, City Manager Hermosa. Yeah, that was my thought. Well, I'm in concurrence with you that we're trying to. I think we're all trying to get maximum participation from our public, and having some people who are comfortable coming to live meetings certainly gives them an option that they don't have with a Zoom meeting. Having said that, would someone like to make a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I'll make the motion to approve Resolution 22-09 with giving staff the discretion to choose whichever option makes the most sense within the next 30 days.
Thank you, Councilmember Ismeni. Is there a second?
Mr. Mayor, could I offer a friendly addendum?
Sure.
I'd like to make sure that the method of the meeting is more clearly communicated on the agenda or otherwise. It was confusing to me actually on this agenda, sort of what the plan was, and I'm sure it might have been confusing for the public as well. So I'd like to just add that the discretion to the staff is I'm totally on board with that. I just would like to make sure that is then communicated more clearly, either through the agenda or other publication.
as the author of the original motion, I would like to amend my motion to include the friendly amendment.
Okay, cool.
No, I will second.
We have a motion, we have a second with an amendment. So I'd like to take this, is there any further discussion? Okay, Madam City Clerk, one more time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The motion made by Councilmember Arizmendi was to approve the adoption of resolution number 22-09 with the amendment made by Councilmember Krebs to make it more clear on the agendas how the meetings will be conducted. Did I get that right, Councilmember Krebs? Okay. And the motion was seconded by Councilmember Krebs. Mr. Mayor, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Garcia.
Aye.
Councilmember Arizmendi.
Aye.
Councilmember Krebs.
Aye.
And Councilmember Parkhurst. What, Councilmember Parkhurst, you're on mute. Was that an aye?
I said aye. Sorry, I didn't catch it.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, the ayes have it.
Thank you, Madam City Clerk. And that moves us on to item number 4, consideration of City Council Resolution 22-08, adopting an ex parte communication and site visit disclosure policy.
Thank you, Mayor Goss. I'll be presenting this one again.
Okay, thank you.
The heart of the rule of this policy is this. If an ex parte communication regarding the public hearing item occurs, at the start of the public hearing, the council member shall verbally disclose the identity of the individual with whom the council member had contact and the substance of the information communicated. In addition, if there's been a site visit, that site visit and anything learned from that site visit should be disclosed. Importantly, this is already the rule. Court precedent requires that a fair hearing take place, and part of that fair hearing requirement is that the applicant have an independent and neutral decision maker. That means that the decision maker not be biased and that they disclose ex parte communications. But in thinking that through and seeing it in practice, I think it makes sense to have a written policy in place because it provides the decision makers like yourselves and the Planning Commission an opportunity to reference a document and to clarify what does constitute an ex parte communication and when it's appropriate to disclose that and when it's not. So regarding when it's appropriate, this policy applies to quasi-adjudicatory proceedings. That's a proceeding where either the City Council or the Planning Commission sits sort of like a judge to make a determination on a specific set of facts. So some examples include an appeal of a land use decision rendered by the Planning Commission, a decision regarding a tentative parcel map or a tract map, or the appeal of a tax determination or a business license decision. What that doesn't include are legislative decisions. Legislative decisions, some examples include changes in zoning or the general plan, adoption of a specific plan, approval of a contract. These are all legislative decisions. Now, to clarify that for both the Planning Commission and the City Council, staff will annotate all the agendas to note when an ex parte disclosure is required and when it isn't. So that's not something the City Council needs to commit to memory, the difference between a legislative and a quasi-judicial decision. Now, regarding who needs to be identified, if you have a ex parte communication, you don't need to identify the individual by name. That's not necessary. You can simply say that you had a communication with the applicant or the property owner or a resident, and you'd state as to what. And the as to what section, why this is particularly important is because we want to capture it in the record. So we're trying to create a public record, and this administrative public record needs to be upheld in court. And if the decision maker makes a decision based on something that's not in the record, that decision may be overturned as arbitrary and capricious. So we want to make sure that any decisions adopted by the decision maker are included in the record, and also that the applicant has an opportunity to rebut any of the information presented before the body hearing the matter, whether that's the Planning Commission or City Council. And lastly, with respect to site visit disclosures, again, the point of that is and this is really related to a property issue, if a property entitlement is going to be issued and the City Council or the Planning Commission visits that site and learns things about that site that isn't reflected in the staff report, we'd like for the Planning Commission members and the City Council members to make that disclosure and to note what it is that they've learned, so it makes it into the staff report for all the reasons stated before. And that concludes my report.
Mr. Mayor, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Thank you, City Attorney Girgosian. Are there any questions?
Mayor?
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. Thank you, City Attorney Girgosian. And I know you said there's going to be something written out in a roadmap, and you explained it very well. I just want to make sure I kind of wrap my head around this because we want to obviously follow the rules. And it seems as though when there is some type of disagreement, then a quasi-judicial decision would need to be made, obviously, and that makes it very easy to understand. But some issues that you cited, such as changing a land use designation, could be controversial. And there are sides to those types of issues. We get approached by one side, perhaps, like an opposition side. From what I understand, that is not necessary to disclose because it is adjudication or procedural due process type issue.
Yes. So courts have determined some decisions to be in the quasi-adjudicatory realm and others to be in the legislative realm. Courts have consistently concluded that all zoning decisions, all general plan amendments, specific plan adoptions, amendments, all of those are legislative in nature, just like every contract approval is, whether that contract is a contract to approve a public works project or a development agreement, all of those would be in the legislative realm and would not need to be disclosed because there is no due process concern regarding legislative decisions. There is only a due process concern with respect to quasi-adjudicatory decisions where the City Council or the Planning Commission sits as basically a judge.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Creeps, I think, was first.
So it strikes me that there are likely to be many instances where a particular issue might concern our role both as adjudicators and as legislators. So, I guess I'm struggling a bit with if you're having a conversation with, a resident probably, because obviously if you're having a conversation with the applicant, that might be a little bit easier, but to then have some sort of parsing of, what is sort of a general conversation into these sort of separate buckets seems prohibitive. And I guess, so that's one thing. And I guess that's not really a question, it's just sort of a concern. And then question, should we then be telling, pretty much anyone that we talk to about any of these issues that might then have to be disclosed on the record, that that's the case? I mean, because it seems to me that folks should be aware that, the contents of a conversation that they might have expected to be, individual could then be basically made, public, on an anonymous basis. But, it seems to me that's something we might consider having to do. And I just wonder if that might chill communication. And I guess my third question is, I appreciate the idea to have, agenda items designated one way or the other, but it seems to me that oftentimes we're talking to folks, about things in general, before they come, officially before the council in a way that we could have that designation. So I wonder your thoughts on how to kind of address that issue, because that seems likely to occur.
Mm-hmm. I'll take them one by one. With respect to the first question, just to clarify, for members of the public and for the council, that in a judicial setting, in a purely judicial setting, a judge cannot have ex parte communications with one side or another. The council is different. The courts recognize that. The council is different because the council is a representative body. So it doesn't prohibit ex parte communications. It only says that if you have those ex parte communications, you should disclose them to be fair. So with respect to your second question regarding the expectations that members of the public might have, I think it would be fair to note at the start of a conversation, if you know that the conversation involves a quasi-judicial decision, to note that while you're happy to hear whatever feedback or input they have, if you learn anything from it, well, first of all, you're gonna have to disclose it. And if you learn anything from it, they'll have to disclose on the record at the public hearing what you learned about that specific issue that you're discussing with them. The third question I think is the most complex, because you're asking how would you know it's a quasi-judicial decision before the agenda is published? And I don't think you would know. The only way I think you would know is if I told you, the city manager told you, or we provided some kind of list that the council could reference. Staff can definitely provide such a list if the council would like. But short of that, I would say that the general rule to keep in mind is if a decision applies to an individual applicant or an individual person, it's probably going to be a quasi-judicial decision. If it applies to the city as a whole, or it's a contract, it's going to be a legislative decision as a general rule.
And so does that override your examples of zoning and specific plan, because, you know, to the extent that those decisions apply to an individual parcel or you know, versus, you know, zoning in general for the city?
Yeah, therein lies the complexity, because it doesn't. Courts have concluded, again, that's the general rule, and in the court's explanation of the general rule, they'll say exactly what I said. But they also, there are carve-outs, and the carve-outs include, oddly enough, a development agreement, which is a contract in nature, but it applies to one applicant, and it applies to the applicant's property rights too. Same thing with the zoning decision. The zoning decision can apply to the entire city, but it could also apply to a single parcel. Courts don't care. Courts have determined that a zoning decision is legislative in nature, regardless of how many parcels it applies to. Same thing with a general plan amendment, same thing with a specific plan. It's confusing, I acknowledge.
May I follow up just for some clarity? A question, City Attorney?
Yes, please.
So the big issue that I want to make sure we have clarification on is the Meadows project, right? There's nothing that's on an agenda for us as we sit here today, but there's a single applicant, right? I don't want to beat around the bush, but we have residents that are contacting us with their concerns. And so single applicant, there's a specific plan, there's all kinds of issues. And we have residents that are contacting us with their concerns. Can you please just tell us how that falls?
Yes, all the phase one approvals, or I should say all the entitlement approvals that are going to be before the Planning Commission, the City Council, in phase one of this development project are legislative in nature. All the approvals in the second phase, and the second phase includes if it gets there, the tentative track map and the design review permit, all of those would be quasi-adjudicatory. So for the first phase, no disclosure will be required. And if we get past the first phase and we get to the second phase, then at that point, disclosures would be required.
Very helpful, thank you.
So I'll follow up on the follow-up. So then if when we get to that second phase and we're contacted by residents are those ex parte communications? Because it is part of the tentative track map, let's say, but they are not the applicant. So it's only if the applicant approaches us that is an ex parte, not the, oh, okay. So I see you shaking your head. Please clarify for me.
Yeah, it's an ex parte communication is a communication with anyone.
Okay.
Outside of a public hearing. In that situation, if a resident approaches you, I think it's fine to say that a resident approached me about the project. Everything I learned is also reflected in the staff report. But if it's not reflected in the staff report, it's important that you include the information that's not reflected in the staff report that would impact your decision. Does that make sense, Councilman Parker?
Yeah, if it's not in the staff report, then we have to disclose. I understand that.
If you'd have to disclose the commitment regardless, but if it's not in the staff report, it's important to disclose that specific piece of information you gleaned from the conversation that wasn't reflected in the staff report.
Okay, that makes it clear. So I'll take it one step further. What's the impact of us not disclosing the ex parte communication? What liability does that open the city up to?
So generally, if a court determines that a decision was rendered by a partial or a decision maker that's not independent, that decision will be overturned. Even if, let's say, for example, the decision was unanimous. Let's say the decision 5-0 in support of something. Even if one council member is determined to be partial or that one of the council members is determined to lack independence, the decision of the entire council can be overturned by a court.
Okay. I'm getting clarity on this. Are there any other questions?
Just one follow-up. City Attorney Gergosen, you mentioned information that's not in a staff report. Sometimes we get information from residents, sometimes that's not in fact factual. It might be conjecture or hypotheticals or just wrong sometimes. And we check the facts and we say, okay, that actually isn't true. Those things that aren't facts, are those necessary to share as well?
I don't think so. Thank you for that question. I think anything that's going to impact your decision should be shared, but to the extent it doesn't impact your decision, to the extent you're not factoring into your decision making, and it's just false, there's no need to share it.
Can I clarify one?
Yes.
So on that note, the fact of someone's opposition could, or a group of someone's opposition could very much factor into, the decision-making process, but it doesn't strike me as a disclosable fact, right? I mean, if you have a conversation with a constituent who says, I'm opposed to this particular item and, gives you the reasons, but not really any particular facts, the fact of their opposition might weigh into your decision. But I'm not hearing that we have to actually then disclose that we met with someone who was opposed to a particular proposal.
That's correct, Councilmember Creeps.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, IT Manager Milan, I think we're ready to do one last public comment tonight.
Mayor, please stand by.
Okay.
Mayor, we don't have anyone wishing to make public comment at this time.
Okay, thank you. So we have resolution in front of us. Do we have any further conversation about this? Can we have a motion?
I move to approve resolution number 22-08.
Second.
Second.
Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none. Madam City Clerk?
Thank you,
You're
Mr.
on.
Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The motion made by Mayor Pro Tem Garcia, seconded by Councilmember Krebs, is to approve Resolution 22-09. Mayor Goss, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Edward Garcia, how do you vote?
Just to confirm, we're voting on 22-08.
Thank you.
Aye, yes.
22-08, adopting an ex-parte communication and site visit disclosure policy. And Councilmember Arismendi, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilmember Krebs?
Aye.
And Councilmember Parkhurst?
Aye.
Mr. Mayor, the ayes have it.
Thank you, Madam City Clerk. So that takes us off to the end of our agenda. I'd like to see if any of my colleagues have any ideas for future agenda items.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem.
I'm sure most of us know that the property at 505 North Hermosa is up for sale. That is the house, the southern house where the Wisteria vine is located. I'd like staff to look into, and I know this is a market transaction, so we don't always move super quick, but at least look into the possibility of the city obtaining that property as an asset, and then potentially having something to say about what can go on with the vine. Obviously, if it's under our ownership, we could do something. So I think we owe it to the community to at least probe into this. We can't promise anything because obviously this is a market transaction and it might be gone before we can even do anything. But I would like staff to look into potentially what the cost would be to purchase this property. There would obviously have to be some retrofitting within to make it usable, maintenance and upkeep, et cetera, what kind of fiscal impact that would have on the city.
Mr. Mayor, can I follow it up? I think with a question maybe to Mayor Pro Tem. Does that include the potential of or the exploration of looking to the house next door that also is up for sale?
Well, I was not privy to the fact that the northern property was up for sale too. Wow. I think we have to look into all options, whether or not they're feasible or not, and we can't litigate or figure that out today. But I think we need to, at least for the public's sake, look into this. The property hadn't been up for sale for a long time, so this is an opportunity.
Okay, just I think staff got that. Any other items for future agenda? Okay, I'm going to do something different here to end the meeting and save Madam City Clerk another roll call. You can, in parliamentary procedure, you can take a vote for unanimous consent without objection. And so I'm going to say this meeting is adjourned if I can have unanimous consent without objection. So if you're all quiet, we get to adjourn. And so it is. So folks, we are adjourned tonight. And please, for the public, don't forget the special meeting of the City Council and the Planning Commission next Tuesday at 5 o'clock at Memorial Park. And don't forget to bring your own folding lawn chair. Good night, everyone.